Welcome back to another episode of Running with Wolves, you guys. I want to talk to you guys today about certain things that you are doing or not doing in your content that are causing your audience to not resonate with you, to not be excited about your content, to not binge your content, and to not actually buy from your brand or your business because of your content. So if you're somebody who doesn't feel like they're seeing results in their content or results in their sales, and you don't know what you're doing right or wrong, let's get into it. All right, guys. So in today's episode, like I said, we're going to go over the most common marketing mistakes that I see business owners making consistently. And honestly, it leads to a real lack of results when it comes to getting content that performs well, when it comes to getting content that your audience binges, and when it comes to actually getting people to buy from you because of your brand or your business. So let's just dig into these mistakes that I see people making day in and day out and talk about how you can fix them. So number one mistake that I see people making in their marketing and their sales is not doing market research. You guys, market research is probably the most important part of your content creation process. And it might just be equally as important to analyzing your data, making sure you're refining your strategy, etc. But market research is the thing that allows your marketing, your content to stand out from other people's because of how specifically you speak to your target audience. So if you're somebody who tells yourself every single day, you're like, I don't know what to talk about in my content. If you're someone that's like, I feel like my audience isn't listening to me, they don't care about my content, I'm not seeing sales from my content, I want you to genuinely ask yourself, how much do I know about my target audience? Because odds are you probably don't know enough. Even if you think you know your target audience, if I asked you to describe them to me, you'd probably say, my target audience is, 18 to 25-year-old women who, want better skin if you're selling a skincare product. They are people who feel like they've tried a lot of different things. That is not your target audience. It is, but it's not deep enough. Your target audience, if you do the right market research, you should understand how they buy. You should understand what they're struggling with in relation to your product or your service. You should know what they want out of a product or service like yours. You should know what they're interested in, what they're already consuming, who their favorite celebrity is, podcasts, movies, books. Pop culture references. Like, you should know all of these things about your target audience so that you can start creating content for them. So if you're somebody, again, like I said, who doesn't necessarily feel like their content is landing the way that it should, or it's creating sales the way that it should, ask yourself, how much do I know about my target audience? And if you feel like market research is where you struggle and you don't know enough about your target audience, we have an entire podcast episode that we did all the way back in October. And we basically talked about like how to do market research so that it actually works. So make sure that you watch that. So biggest mistake that I see people make is that they haven't done market research, but there are also market research mistakes that I see people make. So let's talk about that really quickly. So when it comes to like actual market research mistakes that I see people making, number one is that they do not give their audience prompted responses or answers to choose from to answer their market research questions. And so then the answers that they get aren't actually the answers that they need. Let me tell you what I mean by this. So for example, when we talk to our clients, we give them a set list of questions that we want them to ask their audience that represent a lot of different things. It represents buyer types. It represents problems, desires, right? All of these different things. So we give them a set list of questions to ask, which looks like, what are you struggling with in relation to this product? What do you want out of a product or service like this? What do you take into consideration when you're purchasing a product or service like this, right? And then what we tell them is that if you just ask somebody that point blank, or you ask your audience that point blank, they're not going to give you the right answer because they're just going to talk about what's coming to the top of their head. You need to tell them, do you take this into consideration? Do you take this into consideration? Do you take this into consideration? And let them choose from what resonates with them the most. When it comes to like buyer types, for example, give them answers that represent each buyer type so that when they go to choose from each of those, you're actually getting accurate information. Because if you don't give them that information or those answers to choose from, and you just say, what do you take into consideration, when it comes to purchasing a product or service like this? They're going to say like cost, or, how excited I am about it, or if I really need it, right? It's like none of those are helpful when it comes to deciding somebody's buyer types. But if you give them specific answers to choose from that represent each buyer type, and they choose what resonates with them the most, you're going to get a really clear picture of who the buyer types are that are in your target audience. But it's basically because your audience isn't like a marketing or sales expert, so they don't know the answers that you're looking for. You have to prompt them with answers and see what resonates with them the most. So the biggest market research mistake that I see people making is not prompting their audience with answers and just letting them give them answers, which then gives them inaccurate information, and then trying to create content from that. And then the other really big market research mistake that I see people make is when they're doing competitor research and analysis, they're just taking that information and they're basically just creating the same content that their competitor is creating. The goal of competitor analysis is not for you to find content for you to replicate. It's to see how your audience is responding to your competitor's content and analyze why, and see if there's anything that you can be doing to improve that in your content. The other thing is that when your target audience interacts with and engages with your competitor's content, a lot of times they'll start talking about what they're interested in, what they struggle with, what they desire in those comments. And you can use all of that information in your content. But a lot of people think, oh, I'm just looking at my competitor's content to see what's working for them, and I'm going to replicate that. Absolutely not. Number one, that's just going to dilute the strength and the value of your content and of your brand. So that's definitely not the purpose of competitor analysis. And if you don't know how to properly do competitor analysis, make sure, like I said, you go listen to our other episode, because we talk all about it. Okay, next mistake that I see people making in terms of marketing in general is that they don't have a marketing strategy. And I want to clarify this by saying a marketing strategy is not the same as a content strategy. So when you talk about our content strategy, you think through, I'm going to post 1 reel a day. I'm going to post 1 TikTok per day, 3 TikToks per day. You know how much content you're going to be putting out. You know the kind of formats of content that your audience really likes or resonates with, or what performs well and gets the most views or engagement. But what you don't know is what topics attract them in, what warms them, what engages them, what gets them to binge your content and become basically obsessed with and raving fans of your brand or your business. And you also don't know what messaging or what content topics actually push them over the edge to get them to buy. A marketing strategy is taking your buyer's journey into consideration when it comes to creating your content. You can have the best formatted content, the most beautiful graphics in the world, but if you don't actually know how to create sales through your content, when it comes to a marketing strategy and getting people to go through that funnel, you're still not going to see sales. So if you don't know the difference between a marketing strategy and a content strategy, and you also don't know how to create a marketing strategy for yourself, we created an episode back in February that was called How I Created the Best Marketing Strategy for My Business, Lessons Learned, Changes Made. You can go back and listen to that because it was super, super helpful for a lot of our listeners. But please make sure that when you are creating content, I've said this on TikTok a million times, please make sure you have a strategy. Like, make sure you're doing it intentionally. Otherwise, you're just posting. You're posting pretty content. You're posting content that performs well without any understanding of how to actually drive sales through that content. And it can be really frustrating for people because unintentionally they're showing up without a strategy, and then they're not seeing results, but they're putting in all this effort on the back end to brainstorm the content ideas, create the content, film the content, edit the content, post the content, and it's still not creating them results. And so it can be really frustrating for people because they don't necessarily feel like they actually are seeing results from the effort that they're putting in, but it's because there's no strategy behind it. So please, if you guys have learned anything from my content, from our podcast, it is you need to post with a strategy, with intention behind it, or you're not going to see sales. Okay, Next mistake that I see a lot of our business owners make when it comes to their content is not talking about your audience's pain points. Now, I want to talk about this because it's apparently become a very hot topic when it comes to marketing. And there's a lot of like marketing or sales experts, business coaches out there saying, if you create content that is created around your audience's pain points, you're going to attract in unaligned clients, unaligned customers, people who are stuck in their victimhood, people who don't want to fix things. That is absolutely untrue. Now, here's the thing, you guys. Do I think you should only create content around the problems that people are having and how you can solve them? Absolutely not. You can talk about the desires that somebody has. Like, there's so many content pillars to the warming and the converting phase. But the problem is that there are two ways to motivate people when it comes to sales psychology. And this is genuinely true of every single person. You are motivated by two things. You're either motivated to act by the dream and by casting a vision, or you are motivated by the nightmare or the problems that you're having and staying stuck in that place. It genuinely comes down to those two things. And so if you're not talking about both of those things, you're alienating an entire 50% of your audience who might be motivated to act based on the pain. It would basically be like you wanting to get in the best shape of your life, and all I'm sitting there doing is like rah cheerleading you on the side, being like, you can do it. Think of how fit you're gonna be. Think of your six-pack abs. Think of how amazing you're gonna look. And while that might motivate some people, the other percentage of people, the other 50% of people, if I sat there and I basically was like, listen, you do not want to stay in a place where you feel gross, where you feel sloth-like, where you feel unhealthy all day, every day. I want you to think about the fact that if you don't work out consistently right now, or you don't get into really good shape, really good health, the longevity of your life is going to decrease. You're going to live less. You're going to live a shorter life. Your quality of life is going to decrease. You're not going to be able to travel, to do the things that you want to do, to maybe be like really high energy for your kids one day. You're not going to be able to do those things if you don't do this right now. So I need you to get in shape, get in the healthiest, position of your life, basically. Some people are motivated by what they could have, and some people are motivated by getting away from what they don't want. And so regardless of your industry, if you are someone who is not talking about the pain points that your audience has, and all you're talking about is the desire, like I said, you're literally alienating 50% of your audience because that's just how they're motivated. It's not about attracting in unaligned clients, unaligned customers by talking about pain points. People are motivated to act the way that people are motivated to act. And if you feel like you're attracting in unaligned clients, unaligned customers, it's probably because the content that you're putting out to attract them in isn't necessarily speaking to them specifically and to what they struggle with, what they desire, and showcasing your brand, who you're a good fit for, and the solutions that you offer in a way that makes sense to them. Because by putting out certain pieces of content, you should essentially be turning off anybody who's not a good fit for your brand by being very clear about you, your brand, polarizing opinions, who you guys work with, or who you guys sell products to. You have to be crystal clear about that in your content, and that will make sure that you're not attracting unaligned clients or customers, not talking about pain points. So really quick, let's talk about best tips on like how to effectively address pain points, just because I've definitely seen people who think that creating like pain point content is being like an asshole in your content, right? That's definitely not the case. You don't need to be like mean girl marketing in order to talk about people's pain points. You don't need to shit on people's pain points just to talk about them, right? So when it comes to effectively addressing pain points, what we talk about is think through your target audience's problems that they're encountering because they don't have access to your product or to your service. Then I want you to think about how they are experiencing those problems. So literally just like how they're living on a day-to-day basis, personally, professionally, mentally, emotionally, relationally. There's so much to it, so many layers, right? How are they experiencing those problems on a day-to-day basis? And we, in another episode, have walked through like the visualization exercise that we do to come up with those problems and those desires. But another really, really cool part about market research, which is why it's so important to do it, is that if you do your market research properly, you will have a very clear understanding of what your target audience's pain points are and how they're experiencing them, i.e. their symptoms. So, like I said, when it comes to addressing pain points, you can talk about how someone is experiencing those pain points in a very realistic way, but you don't have to like really, I don't know how to explain this, but you don't have to like shit on people who are experiencing it that way. I can talk about how if you don't have a marketing strategy, you're not going to see sales, and how you're sitting in front of your computer taking hours every single day to brainstorm content ideas, to create the content, to post the content, and then you're feeling like shit because you're not seeing sales. That's me talking about someone's pain point, but I'm not being mean or rude about it. I could be totally rude and mean and basically say, if you don't have a marketing strategy, you literally know nothing about marketing and you're never going to see sales in your business. Like if I wanted to be a bitch about it, I totally could, right? But instead of saying it that way, I'm more so talking about what they're experiencing because it's just the reality of things. And there's nothing mean about talking about the reality of things. Okay, so next problem, very much tied together that I see a lot of other business owners making when it comes to their marketing is not talking about their audience's desires. So like I was just saying, you literally alienate 50% of your audience if you only talk about one or another. So if you're just talking about pain points and you're not talking about people's desires, that's where you're not talking to everyone you possibly could be speaking to. You're not activating everyone you could possibly be speaking to because you're only talking to one group of people who's motivated one certain way. So when it comes to talking about your audience's desires in a way that's relevant to your business, what we want to make sure we're focusing on is that it's industry specific. So when it comes to like, let's say, for example, you are a health coach, right? And you're talking about somebody's desire to, create a successful business. Like if you're a health coach who has created a successful business and you're talking about, helping other people create a successful business or like things that you should be doing to create a successful business or an effective business, you have just completely gone over your audience's heads because that's not what they're consuming your content for. You have to think about the intention of your content in relation to your audience. So if you're talking about desires, but they're not industry specific, it's not going to do anything for your sales. You have to think about people's desires as it pertains to your product or your service. Or like, for example, if I, as a marketing and sales expert, started talking about wanting to scale your business to multiple seven figures, but I'm not talking about marketing and sales, I'm talking about your product suite, that's going to be really confusing to my audience because that's not what they consume my content for, right? They probably already have their product suite nailed as a seven-figure business owner trying to scale to multiple seven or even eight figures. And so me talking about that is going to completely turn them off from my content because it doesn't make sense to them. It's not relatable. It's not identifiable in relation to my industry specifically. So it's going to be really, really important for you when it comes to talking about your audience's desires to make sure that they are industry specific. Okay, next mistake, which I love this mistake, and I do see a lot of people making this mistake consistently in their marketing and their sales, is you guys are afraid to speak your own minds. You are not saying anything controversial. You're not saying anything that makes you stand out from the crowd. And I've actually had this conversation with probably like 5 or 6 clients this week because they were basically talking about like, I'm really afraid that people are going to disagree with me in the comments if I, speak my mind and it's my opinion and it might be polarizing. Yes, but I'm really afraid that people are going to disagree with me. And I don't want my page to be one of people just coming and disagreeing with me for engagement purposes, right? But what I want you to think about is if you said nothing about your unique opinions, your polarizing opinions, maybe they might be a little bit controversial for your industry specifically, how are you going to stand out from your competitors? Truthfully, like really, how are you going to stand out from your competitors? I've seen so much content on TikTok recently about founder forward brands. And I think it's especially important for founder forward brands because honestly, that's the way that we're seeing, marketing and sales going is like people need like a face to the brand in order to be successful. And they need to know what is different about you as a human and you as a brand. And if you are not talking about your opinions how are you going to stand out from the crowd? Yeah, you could have a different product or service, or you could have a better client experience, or you could have, really funny content that you put out, but there's no meat to that, right? You're not conveying that to your audience. And when it comes to like that funnel that we talk about of attract, warm, convert, it's really important for you guys to make sure when you're warming people up in your audience, the way you get them to become raving fans of your brand or of your business is by familiarizing them with who you are, what you do, how you think, what you think differently than other people in your audience, or other people that are your competitors. That way, if they lined up 10 people in your industry, they were like, I really like so-and-so because they have this belief and I agree with that belief. The other really cool part about controversial beliefs, when we're talking about like attracting in unaligned clients or customers, it turns off people who are not a good fit for your brand. It is such a good like sifter, essentially, to make sure that the people who you wouldn't want to work with or wouldn't want your products kind of essentially fall through the cracks because they don't agree with your opinions. I have so many people, this just happened to me recently, actually, and I was just talking to a client about this. I have so many people, whenever I post a video where I talk about how educational content when it comes to creating sales is completely dead, whenever I post a video about that, there are so many people in the comments who are like, yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, finally somebody said it. And then the other 50% of people are like, no, you're wrong. Who do you think that I want to work with when it comes to my content? Or when it comes to my business? I want to work with the people who agree with me because they're going to be coachable, because they're going to respect what I say, versus the people who don't agree with me, who aren't seeing results in their business anyways, or if they are, they're not seeing as good of results as they could be as quickly as they could. I want to work with the people who are like, finally, I respect your opinion. I see you as a leader because of what you're talking about. Everybody else is just there to disagree with me, and they're going to go away eventually. So please do not be afraid to show up, take up space, talk about what you believe in. Who cares if people don't agree with you? Because to be totally frank, you're not going to want to work with them, or you don't want them in your audience anyways. The other thing I also want to mention when it comes to talking about controversial opinions or polarizing opinions is there is a difference between talking about something that's controversial and saying something harmful or something that could get them canceled. This is honestly like when your grandparents come to like Thanksgiving dinner and they give like a really racist or sexist take on something, and you're like, that's really offensive to people. And they're like, no, I'm just speaking my mind. It's like, there's a difference between speaking your mind and having a polarizing take and being a genuinely good human being and not saying things that are hurtful, and not saying things that could be construed as really inappropriate because they are really inappropriate. So when it comes to being controversial, keep it industry specific. And please make sure that your thoughts and opinions and takes are not hurtful. And let's strive to be good human beings in our marketing and in our sales and in our lives in general. And that's all I'm going to say about that. All right, next mistake that I see a lot of people making. Sorry, let me just make sure this is still out. Next mistake that I see a lot of people making is that you guys are not looking at your data. Oh my gosh. Like I said, this is probably second most important part of your marketing and sales strategy, second to the prep work, right? Because if you don't do the prep work right, you don't do marketing and market research, competitor analysis, all of that good stuff, it's going to be really hard to create a strategy. If you don't do data analysis, it's going to be hard to refine your strategy and scale. So the prep work is for building your strategy and creating initial results. Data analysis is all about figuring out what's working and what's not and why. So all you do moving forward in your strategy is what's working. You're cutting off the dead weight. So when it comes to looking at your data and what you should be looking at in general for metrics of each phase of the wolf funnel. So we talk about attract, warm, convert. So the attraction piece you want to be looking at, obviously the purpose of attraction is to get as many eyes as possible onto your content and onto your profile and onto your brand and your business. So when it comes to pulling metrics, I want you guys to really think through, like, what is the purpose of this phase, and therefore what metrics should I pull? So like attraction phase, for example, views, like what content got the most views, what got the most profile views, what got the most follows, what got the most likes, right? Or what got the most shares, right? That's going to indicate visibility. So typically we're looking at like top performing content there. And the question you always want to ask yourself when you're pulling data is why? Why did this perform so well? Was it a format of, the content? Was it a trend? Was it a CapCut template? Was it that I had a really good visual and verbal hook? Was it the topic I was talking about? Why did this post perform so well? Same thing with the warming phase. You want to be looking at engagements and conversation. So like comments, saves, shares, responses to Instagram stories, and why? Why did it perform well? Same thing with converting. You want to be asking yourself what got the most inquiries, website traffic, purchases, is your abandoned cart rate going up? And if so, why, right? Like there's just so much to pull there. So when it comes to pulling data, that's the kind of metrics you should be looking at for each phase. And again, like I said, ask yourself consistently, why did this do so well in this phase, and refine from there. Last mistake I see business owners making is that, they don't invest in themselves or for support in their business. You guys, I have scaled this business to a multi-million-dollar marketing and sales company in 4 years, 4.5, we'll say. And I, no joke, without a doubt, will tell you we would not be where we are today had we not invested in support. I consider myself to be a very savvy person. I have experience being an entrepreneur and a business owner. I have a ton of experience in a lot of different industries, but I've never scaled a marketing and sales agency. And so if I had not gotten support from business coaches who knew how to scale my kind of business without a shadow of doubt, and they were experts in what they did, I could not learn from the mistakes they or their clients had made. I could not, I would have had to literally figure everything out on their own or on my own. And the problem with that is, would I still have created this result? Absolutely, I would have, because I am so determined, and I never would have stopped until I saw this kind of success. Would I have grown this quickly? No. Do I think that I would have had to file bankruptcy and basically bounce back? Yeah, actually, because 2 years ago in the summer, we were in the negative for 2 months. I talked about this before, because of internal systems, processes, things like that, and mistakes that we made in terms of how we set them up. So we had more cash going out the door than we had coming in. And I had to do a very quick 180 to be able to really make sure that we were headed in the right direction. And if I had not had strategic advice from my business coach at that time, I genuinely think that would have been the end of this business, to be totally frank. And so for you guys, when you think about scaling your business, I don't want you to just think about am I going to see results if I scale it on my own? You absolutely will. If you're determined to be successful, you will be successful, point blank. But think about, how much less time would it take me? How much less money would it take me? How many less mistakes and headaches would I have to make if I invested in somebody's strategic support and advice who had gone before me and had created the kind of success I wanted to create, and I could basically get the blueprint for that success and mistakes that they made, how to avoid them, etc., and see the kind of results that I wanted to see sooner and easier. So that's what I have to say about investing. The other thing I also wanted to mention is thinking through the kind of support that you need to get. A big mistake I see people make when they're investing in support is they invest in just a Band-Aid fix. There are so many people who are so overwhelmed a year into starting their business, and they hire a virtual assistant who literally does nothing for them. They hire them because they know they need help, but they don't know what they need help with. And so they just hire the first person that has general experience so that they can just get something off of their plate. But then you have to train that person, you have to manage them. And then on top of that, because you have to go through this like training phase, a lot of times there's more work that gets added to your plate. There's a whole bunch of things that happen when you make the wrong hire. Same thing on the investment side of things. There are so many people that think, oh, if I hire a business coach, I'll see more sales. But a business coach is not a sales expert. A business coach is a generalist, and they can help you set up and scale your business across the board. But because they're not specializing in just sales, there are certain things that they won't know that a marketing and sales expert would. And if marketing and sales is your only issue, then that's what you should be hiring for, not a business coach, because they're going to give you a lot of other advice that you may or may not need. So you have to think through when you're making a hire or making an investment, what kind of support do I need? Do I need general support, or do I need specific support, and hire and invest accordingly? And then the last thing that I will say is a big mistake I see people making when it comes to investing is investing at the wrong time, or investing too late, or investing before you're ready. So how do you know that you are ready to make an investment? So like, interestingly enough, my mom, is on the journey of like restarting her own business. She's started businesses in the past. And she asked me, she was like, how did you know when you were ready to hire a business coach? And I was like, I literally got my business to a point where it was bringing in sales, 10K per month on my own before I hired a business coach. So please don't buy into the narrative that if you just try to do things on your own, that you won't be successful. If you are smart, if you're resourceful, if you work hard, you will be successful, and you can figure out a lot of stuff on your own. But it's the scaling that I think you really need the support in, honestly, because when you're scaling, it's so much more complex than just nailing like marketing and sales principles and frameworks. The other argument that can be made a lot of times when it comes to investing is investing up front. So you can be taught how to set things up correctly from the floor up with your business so that scaling happens easier. Would I change my journey? Probably not. I think I hired a business coach at the exact right time. It was probably about 3 months into my business. I understood the kind of effort and work that it took for me to see those results, and I was willing to continue that. All I needed was the right information to plug into. I think a big thing that I see a lot of people do is they make investments into business coaches or anything, thinking that it's going to get them results, or that that person is going to create those results for them, without taking accountability for the kind of effort they're going to need to put in to actually see results, to grow and scale their business. So I would say make sure when you are investing, you understand the basics of what you're getting support in. You also are ready to put in the work, and you understand that investing in any level of support, whether it's hiring or outsourcing or bringing in strategic support, you will still have to work on some level to see results. I am 4.5 years into this business, and I still have my hands in some pots when it comes to marketing, sales, our business, podcast. I still have to film content. I still every now and then have to send voice notes to people in sales conversations. I still have to give the team feedback. There is a lack of an ownership mentality when it comes to business owners, because I think they just want to create money and not have to work for it. And it doesn't work like that, you guys. You will always, as a business owner, have to create some sort of effort to create results. And that may be direct. When it comes to creating your own sales, your own marketing, it might shift and be your effort is, targeted towards your team and they're creating the results for you. But you're never, ever just going to be able, as a small business, to step away and never, ever put in any kind of work and just lay on the beach in a bikini and bring in millions and millions of dollars. It just does not work like that. So that's the mistakes that I see most business owners making. So if you guys ever have questions about any of this, if you want to know more about how to fix, these mistakes, we have a ton of different episodes with resources around all of these different topics. So make sure that you go listen to it. Or if you're watching this on social media, pop your questions in the comments below, and I would love to answer them for you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.